Is it really a surprise to me that they're taking you seriously? I always had the very best seats, now they're calling you off of the streets. Your face is now a sharpened jaw, and all these women are in shock and awe. That such a nice guy could be so unrefined. It's like an ancient tire curves, and what you leave me was worse. There's no one round in the lot for us to be seen and call on. And I've been hoarding all your tapes again. I know you got yours headed. And I'll be waiting when I walk in the door, knowing how these conversations tend to go. Your eyes told me I'm behind, but I can't stop thinking of this mind. It's like an ancient tire curves, and what you leave me was worse. Just for
Hey
now.
gamers, welcome back to Cinema Curse, episode 21. Not welcome back to this episode, but this is the episode, and I am welcoming you back. It's been like a month. Tonight, the Media Literacy Hour. Media literacy, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. If some of the takes and ideas I've seen get praised online lately is anything to go by, we're talking about two of my favorite movies from last year, Emerald Fennell's Saltburn and Todd Haynes' December. Two movies that I think have been pretty brutally misinterpreted by certain people online. And we're also talking, because it's kind of another Road to the Oscars movie, we're talking about some of our prestige later in the year movie releases, specifically Eileen and Napoleon's, all the ones that came out December 1st and before. And we're going to do kind of another roundup on a future episode, but I'm explaining too much. I'm your Wicked Game Master, Connor Lloyd Crews. The Joey Chestnut of Talking About Movies, Edwin Gomez, couldn't make it tonight because he is in a lengthy, prolonged legal battle right now with the Los Angeles Fire Department. They said that many DVDs in his room was a bad idea, a fire code violation, and he countersued them, thinking that they had sued him, but they hadn't. And it's just kind of escalated. It's snowballed beyond control. You might not believe this, but Edwin isn't the greatest in court. But who else is with us today? Joining us again.
Hey guys, it's Brian. How are you?
And I had to do math in my head, not math, number math.
Hey everyone, I'm Scott.
Letter
Good to see ya.
math. I'm. It's been so long.
And it's me, I'm Paul.
I always
Good
do.
to see you again.
People. Most everyone gets. I go to them in like last name alphabetical order, and in my head I was like H or I, Heaton, Immerman. I had to like think for a second. But yeah. Thank you to Marina Sakamoto and her band Shunken for the use of their song Curse off the EP She Nods for our opening credits. It's been 70 days since the strike ended and the AMPTP still sucks. Yeah, how's everybody doing? I'm a little flustered. It's been a while.
I'm doing good. Good to see you guys.
Good to
Definitely.
see you
It's been a minute
guys.
for sure.
It's good to see everyone.
But let's dive into it. I gotta change my background for Saltburn. Um,
Nice, very nice.
Before we
I was trying to think what variation. I had a feeling it was going to be something. I was trying to think what it might be.
something along that line.
Mhm.
The theme I've decided to connect these two movies, Saltburn and December, is media literacy, because it's a thing that I, like an old man, have been very worried about lately. Like, oh, these people online, these kids, they're probably people my age. They don't understand things. And we just watched Body Double for our movie night, which the four of us kind of at this point are sort of the core of that. And I looked up this there's this on the Wikipedia page for Body Double. Roger Ebert, who he liked it a lot, he gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars, which is a very positive review. But he said a couple of things that I thought were interesting. He said, a thriller in the Hitchcock tradition in which there's no particular point except that the hero is flawed and we identify with him completely. And it made me feel pretty good, because I was like, oh, okay, we've always been sort of illiterate when it comes to media, and I love Roger Ebert, but to watch Body Double and to think that there's no like subtext going on seems like, whether or not you like the movie, like it seems kind of baffling to me.
Yeah.
And we'll have to wait with Saltburn, I think, to get into the spoiler section to really talk about the way that people have been misinterpreting the movie, in my opinion. But
I was enjoying Body Double,
yeah,
but then I had to poop.
yeah. You had one of your
So I didn't
celiac
finish
things, right?
I had to poop.
You should
It
finish
is what it is.
watching the rest of it.
I should.
Rewatching it, I liked it a lot. But who wants
It's
to
like 3 Hitchcock movies
yeah,
converged
it was a mashup.
into a De Palma movie.
Yeah.
Paul, because the only one you've seen, do you wanna summarize Saltburn for us? Salt Bay.
Well, I don't want to get into spoilers, but it's about a young man who is a student at, I think it's Oxford, or is it Cambridge? Oxford, right?
It's Oxford.
Oxford.
Which is notably is Emerald Fennell, I think, also went there, the writer-director.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Probably
yeah,
around the time
so-
this is supposed to be set, also.
Right. So very,
Yeah.
very posh school. Student at Oxford. He's a little bit socially awkward, it seems, and can't really make friends, but then develops a relationship with this very popular, like a friendly relationship with this very popular, attractive male student that he has a crush on. And he tells him that his father had just died, gaining his sympathy, and then the friend invites him to his place, his beautiful, like basically a castle. It's like a palace of an estate, because he's like old British wealthy.
It's a house with a name, which is how you know it's
a house
fancy.
with a name, and he invites him there to stay with him over the summer. And
Shenanigans ensue.
Shenanigans ensue.
Yeah,
without getting
and
into
it's kind of
spoilers.
about Oliver, the awkward kid, kind of almost like worming his way into Felix, that being the rich kid's family. And
it's his way of like an outsider sort of trying to integrate.
Yeah.
himself
One thing you didn't mention
into-
was like the class, where like Oliver is seen as quite poor and an outcast, where the person he befriends, is living in an
as rich
estate.
as it gets.
Yes.
Bruce
Yeah.
Wayne
Yeah.
rich.
Yeah, exactly.
and it's like sort of, there's definitely a big fish out of water element.
Both of
where
these
he's just-
movies, interestingly, that we're talking about, are about essentially intruders into situations, and following those people, and questions about, like, what the fuck are they doing there?
Yes.
But I really loved Saltburn. I definitely get that on some level. A lot of what it's doing has kind of been done on before, but I think there's a specific thing that it's doing that's pretty unique that we can't really get into until we go into spoilers. But I think it looks great. It sounds great. Great performances. Really funny, like the butler, all the stuff with him,
Yeah.
or the scene with the breakfast where he doesn't know how they do breakfast and they're all just giving him these withering looks, or just pretty much anything that Rosamund Pike says is hilarious.
That's one thing that, because I know you said you like the movie, and I love the movie too. I thought it was great, and I was kind of surprised about the mixed reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would have been more acclaimed than it was. I mean, people liked it. It got decent reviews, but Rosamund Pike, I thought like she had a good chance at an Oscar nomination,
Yeah.
best supporting actress, but I don't think she's in the running.
No, I don't think so either.
They announced the Oscars nominations, right? Or no?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
But
yet, but
I would,
apparently
you base them off
she's
of-
not in the running. Yeah.
this never got the momentum I think it needed.
Yeah.
In fact, it's funny
No.
that I'm pairing this as it is, because originally I wanted to do a Saltburn episode since I saw it like in the first time in late October or whenever. And I think back then in my head I was thinking, because Emerald's first movie, which to be fair was a pandemic year movie, so you know, I think, but Promising Young Woman,
Right,
which
yeah.
is very good. But that got a lot of Oscar and award attention, and so in my head I was kind of thinking like, okay, well, you know, months before, like this feels like it's going to have that momentum, but it never really caught it, because I think it was kind of divisive.
And there's a lot this year. I mean,
That is
there's
true.
just a whole lot.
Yeah.
But also,
Yes.
just in terms of reviews, like it didn't get the praise that I was maybe like once seeing it. I'm like, this is really good. I thought, you know, it would capture the attention of critics, but
Yeah,
it didn't
I
seem
saw
to.
it. Yeah, I saw it back in October. Brian and I saw it at Beyond Fest, so it's been a minute. But we really enjoyed it. I know that's a particular audience, so like I knew this wasn't for everyone, but yeah, I thought it'd be more critically acclaimed. I thought it was gonna be one of those movies where like people were gonna see it and be like, "What were they thinking? This is getting such great reviews," and what are those critics thinking? They're insane.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite go that way. Like
No.
it was divisive amongst the critical community, which I was. Again, we were all saying we were surprised though, because we all seemed to really, really enjoy it. I will say I don't like. I think there were good individual performances. I'm not shocked that it's not getting a lot of Oscar attention, just because like you guys said, there is a lot of great stuff, and like I don't know, it's a good movie. It's really a lot of fun, but like I don't know, maybe it's not
Yeah.
great.
I-
But
Well,
it
I
looks
wouldn't
great.
expect like best picture or
Yeah.
like a lot of major nominations. I do think Rosamund Pike though should have been a contender for an Oscar.
Yeah, she was really great. Yeah. But yeah, I could see it not quite making the cut. But I
Also,
I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
the lead, Barry, is it
Keoghan.
Keegan?
Keegan,
Keegan.
Yeah.
He's
I think
just-
he was excellent too.
he was great. I
and
basically
he's-
coined the movie the Barry Keegan Kink Factory
Yeah.
because it was just wild times.
Yeah, I think maybe it's lack of nominations has to do with the stuff we're talking about. I have two other theories, are potential, things that could add to it. One is just it is a little nasty in certain ways
It
that
is.
it could
Yeah.
actually turn people
Yeah.
off. And then I think two, the real target of its ire, and again we have to wait to spoilers to get to this, I could see like it hitting a little too close to home for a lot of Oscar voters, in terms of like the type of person it's specifically criticizing.
Sure.
That is, yeah, I can see that, because also like there was a bit with Promising Young Woman that like they can congratulate themselves for rewarding such a progressive film.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Promising Young Woman is really just about the sexes and gender, and this is much more about class and things like that. And
well, I think we've had a few different takes on the Eat the Rich story as well in the past few years. So I don't know if that's plays into some people just are like, I don't want to do this again, or between the Menu and one last year,
Triangle Sadness.
Triangle of Sadness, thank you. And between those two, maybe that played into some of the casual moviegoers.
I think I want to just go ahead and pop into spoilers. The one last non-spoiler thing I want to talk about is just I really like the title design. It reminds me of like, it almost looks like it was in a good way. I say this as a compliment. It looks like it was made in MS Paint. It has this very like digital artificialness to it that I think kind of works with the movie. It reminds me of like the Dilbert web animations that people made. Not Dilbert, not the old cartoon, but there's these animations called like Dilbert 2 and Dilbert 3. Huge content warning for anyone who watches those, but they're these weirdo animations where Dilbert is like gets a gun and goes and shoots up the office, and like whenever he's talking to people, like their head, like as he's asking them questions, his head will like turn into a pyramid. But it's all like done in MS Paint. But anyways, let me throw up.
Dilbert cartoon was great.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed that show.
Let me throw up the old
on
spoiler.
UPN.
Yeah.
Good old UPN.
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't not exist anymore.
Spoilers.
Well,
we're talking
it's
Dilbert.
CW now, right? Never mind. I'm sorry. No Dilbert.
Come for the Oscar talk. Stay for the
So here's my thing.
Uses the theme for the Forbidden Zone.
Oh, really?
The opening theme is the Forbidden Zone.
I've seen a lot of people say that this movie, because clearly, as the movie progresses, it becomes more and more obvious how much Oliver is a snake and how much he is manipulating this family. And I've seen a lot of people talk about how the movie is like pro rich people, which is debatable, and anti working class. And the thing there is that there's a reveal about 2/3 of the way through the movie, towards the midpoint ish, I think, that Oliver isn't working class. He is upper middle class, in fact, and he's been lying this whole time in order to manipulate Felix and his family. And I think that's what makes this movie interesting, is that unique take on it, because I think Fennel is from probably a similar background to Oliver, if I had to guess. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the smaller things, like early on when Oliver pretends he can't pay for a round of drinks when he clearly can, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of those small things like that she even did, like in college. And
I think you're very right, because even like music theme, everything felt like it was her experience for the years that she was doing that, for sure. So I'm sure picked up a bunch of that. And it would make sense, if she was that peering in on these like super well-off people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that I like when it comes to art and themes and things like that is when you're essentially just criticizing yourself. And I wonder if this is Fennel to a certain degree criticizing like a viewpoint that she maybe used not to have. Maybe she doesn't have it anymore. Maybe she's dealing with it. But that I think that there's a lot of middle class, especially upper middle class people who like to cosplay as if they're suffering economically, when reality they're benefiting from the fucked up situation that's going on in the whole world essentially right now with with all the systems in place. And I wonder if like a lot of people having the negative reactions of the movie are part of that same upper middle class, and they get a little uncomfortable, like because the one thing you could maybe say is a criticism of the movie, but this is like, who gives a shit, is that it's probably a little more it probably has a nicer, more positive review of the upper class and the upper middle class. But like, who gives a shit? Like, and that's kind of the point of the movie. Also,
I think it paints them both as
yeah.
I don't think it really even criticizes the upper middle class. It criticizes this character.
Yeah.
And like this particular character, maybe he's an archetype for people in the upper middle class, but I don't think it's necessarily like in its text like really a criticism of them.
I think it's a criticism of a specific type of upper middle class person.
Yes.
Because clearly his parents seem lovely. Like, they seem like very nice, normal people who just want a relationship with their son. And
yeah.
But I think the like criticism of the like upper class comes from like how he was able to manipulate them, because like the way they treat Carey Mulligan's character, and essentially that was how they were going to that was essentially what was going to happen to him if he was who he said he was. It's like eventually he was going to get chewed up and spit out, and they'd find a new pet. So I think while there wasn't any specific like criticism of them, I think it was just like, this is what they are. Like just watching them, you know, as they fell, I didn't like particularly care, you know, like it ended. I was like, yeah, good for him. You know, like it's a different rich asshole on top. All right.
Thanks for the raid, Cut Zone. But yeah, no, I think some of Oliver's lines towards the end really like sum up the movie's feelings on the rich, where he talks about how, one, he has that line about, I actually know how to work, but more importantly, he has that line about you guys were like sleeping dogs lying belly up. And I think the rich in this movie are presented at best pretty stupid.
They're aloof to everything, for sure.
I think is the biggest way to the biggest sort of like theme and way they portray them is very undeserving of the wealth that they have.
Yeah.
Like they don't do anything.
No.
Yeah.
It's just like they're very stupid and insular and have no idea what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah. There's that line Rosamund Pike has about when there's that song playing and she's like, oh, people thought this was written about me, but in it, you know, it says she has a thirst for knowledge and I've never wanted to know anything. And
I enjoyed that take actually about almost tearing them down from the inside versus, you know, you see these rich people just kind of going out of their way to be terrible. You know, it was like they just living their lives, and this it was like a reverse of what you might see.
Like they're not it's weird, like I don't think they're malicious or awful people really.
No, I mean they are definitely, I would say, in a kind of way, better people than Oliver for sure in the movie.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, you look at them and you're like, this is just such a ridiculous situation. How these people are sort of living in such luxury for no reason. Other than just being born into something.
And I think that's the difference between them and Oliver, is that they were like born into their awfulness. Like they didn't really necessarily have a choice, where Oliver chose violence. Oliver is like...
I was gonna...
Also, it's the difference between like Oliver doesn't... The upper middle class has the what Oliver was born into, has the need to work, but is set up to make it possible for you to work as much as like it gives you all the opportunities for you to be successful in life, if you just take advantage of it. Whereas the hyper rich, the people in this mansion, they don't have to worry about anything. They don't have to work at all. They don't have to do and there's a sort of envy there, where it's like I just want more.
Yeah.
I don't recognize my privilege.
Yeah.
I just want to have what they have, and I don't know. I thought Saltburn was great, and I thought I know you were saying about the messaging. Like some people were saying that. I'll let you go into that about the how it was sort of offensive to the.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think
Middle
I
class.
already kind of addressed it. I just think it's like, I think it's people not, I mean, going into the media literacy thing, I think it's people literally like looking at the movie on the surface and being like watching the first half hour maybe and being like, oh, it's a movie where the poor guy is a bad guy and the rich guys are the victims, like you know what I mean? And not being able to understand like story, because I don't think it's not even that nuanced of a movie. It's a pretty bombastic movie, which I love. You know, that's the kind of stuff I like. And so it's really like, it's shocking to me almost, that far more shocking than any of the weird freak shit that happens in the movie. Which
I will say about the freak shit. Like I've heard about like how like shocking it is.
It's not.
Maybe I'm just like very like desensitized to this stuff. I didn't think it was like that crazy.
No.
You know?
I think it's crazy in context, because it's especially as it goes and as it builds, it like it kind of just dumps you into these moments. But I mean, I sort of agree, but they are still great moments. So this behind me, for people
They
who
are
don't
great
know,
moments.
is probably the first big freak moment, or the first kind of turn in the movie. It happens about a third to like maybe towards the midpoint of the movie. Is Oliver and Felix are sharing a bathroom, and Felix behind a closed door jerks off while he's taking a bath, and then as the water is draining and Felix leaves the room, Oliver gets in the bathtub and slurps up some of the water, specifically like almost eating out the drain.
The way that was shot too was incredible. With he was just you felt him relishing in every moment of what he was doing.
And it's definitely that moment that's probably the most actually shocking moment of the movie, because it's the first like turn in terms of being like,
before then we like are very,
we're not prepared.
Well, even I don't want to kink shame to say that we're not sympathetic with him after that moment. But I feel like we've sort of been introduced to him as sort of a
naive
a
outsider
character that we can relate to. You know, like a character that's you know, might have his flaws, might have you know, some things, but he's a character that we can relate to, and therefore we're rooting for him. And then once that happens, we're like, whoa, there's something deeper with this character that we're not really being shown.
Because there's 3 scenes in a row there. There's that scene. The scene after that is the scene with him and Rosamund Pike, where we can, like, for the first time really see how he's manipulating them, where he has that line about, like, it must have been hard having you as a mother. And she's like, why? And he's like, because you're so fucking beautiful. And, like, clearly, and specifically he starts...
And it, like, pays off.
And he also brings up about Carey Mulligan's character, like, oh, do you think maybe she was making up all those stories and she's not as poor off as she is? And then the scene after that is when he... eats out Venetia when she's on her period.
That's another scene that's like gross, but
probably the least shocking of the shocking scenes, in my opinion.
I think so. But maybe
and
it's
Farley
just because
as well.
I'm desensitized. Like I will say, I was watching it with my mom.
Jeez. I can't imagine.
Because I'm like, you know what? I know she'd love this movie, but the one reservation for me to showing her are these little scenes. That scene, or the slurping scene, the bloody scene, and the dirty scene.
The grave, the scene where Oliver fucks Felix's grave. After he dies.
That was the moment when we were seeing it at Beyond Fest that I was like, oh, they're going for it.
And
but you could see it kind of playing out, and you're like,
I was sitting there I remember thinking like, oh, it'd be pretty funny if he does this, and then it was like they stayed
totally.
on it, and I was like,
Totally.
oh wow, they okay, here we go. And
Yeah, that's where the shock was. It wasn't like about being desensitized or like, oh, that's something I haven't seen before. You're like, oh, okay, that's an idea. I bet he wouldn't fuck that grave. And then next thing you know, he's doing it.
Well, because they play it out
time,
enough.
Yes.
Like, as absurd as it is, I don't think it's like. Obviously, I'd never fuck a grave.
Obviously,
Okay.
that goes without saying.
I'm glad we got that on tape.
But
Yeah,
I don't
Did you
think
get that?
it's so absurd that like it's unbelievable.
No.
You know?
It-
Like I
I just don't think I've seen it before.
Yeah.
I don't think it crosses a line of like, oh, this movie is just doing absurd things for shock value. I think it was good enough that was. I think it made sense given the character and the context.
I think so
Yeah.
too. Apparently,
Yeah, I
that
think
was
so.
something that Barry Keoghan brought to set. He wanted to do that. That was his idea. He was like, "Let me fuck this
See?
grave." He like asked them to
Yeah.
clear the set. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Said I'm gonna fuck a grave.
yeah. I'm gonna put my dick in this,
Yeah, you
And
know
everyone's
what?
just like, okay, great, let's do it.
which is
It'd be great if you're an actor and just do that every day. It's just like, I'm gonna fuck this thing.
which is funny because he tops the grave, even though he reads as such a bottom in every other interaction with the dudes. And
Well,
IMHO.
That's
You know,
the
maybe
one.
He's versatile.
Versatile.
He's a switch because
they're-
even
and
the
they're
way
bi
he was
also, I
with
think.
I'd say
and the way he
when
was
you
with Farley too.
and the thing is, when you're dead, you can't get much more bottom.
Yeah,
Like that
that's
kind of makes you the ultimate bottom. So
I wanted to ask what are y'all's like final reads on Oliver, because like I think that's something that's interesting about the movie is that he clearly is this manipulative snake who is just trying to get his own big castle that he can dance around nude in. That ending is great. But
Yeah, it
also like he does seem at often in the movie to truly be in love with Felix, or at least the idea of what Felix represents.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah. I think it is definitely the idea of it. But I think he's so calculated, and that was the interesting thing is everything. Like he obviously didn't know how it was going to fully play out. But even like when Farley came in and started to kind of see what he was up to, he had a way of kind of pushing him away and getting him out of being potentially ruining his whole plan. And I think that he's adaptable, and that was what it was throughout the whole thing. Even the way he dealt with the father at the end and all these things, it was just calculated, but it was very like, I can just go on the fly and fix this in the best way.
That's the thing. Is he like sets little traps.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Like he lays the seeds, and then the seeds he doesn't necessarily know where they'll go, but they're things that'll give him an advantage in manipulating people in the future. And
He's a master of the long con.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think
The really long con.
right,
Mhm.
but I think I don't think he necessarily thought, he didn't plan the ending.
No.
Like,
yeah, I don't think he would have necessarily preferred to go that way. I think like he did.
I think like early on his plan was to fuck Felix.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
fuck
know?
Felix, get in with the family. It was like hitting benchmarks.
I want to
Yeah.
fuck Felix, and therefore I'm going to, as part of the movie, sabotage his bicycle.
Yeah.
And
get to
things
know
like
him.
that. I'm gonna get to know him. I'm gonna try to integrate with his social group, and that's sort of the way he goes. Like he realizes that's going to happen, but he's just trying to get closer and closer and closer. And I think I don't know. I think I definitely think he's a sociopath, obviously, but
Yeah. But it's definitely it's interesting because there is these two, because I think they do become, especially around the time that he kills Felix, obviously, he has these two competing drives within him, which is one to be with Felix and the other to essentially be Felix. and they,
It's a bit talented, Mr. Ripley.
yeah, no, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think almost like once he visits once he's in Saltburn,
Hmm.
his goals have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I
He's
think
no
they changed
longer-
once again when Felix brings him back to his house and he sees the reality. But to him, that was probably the biggest. Like you went, I hate you now. You
Well,
went
yeah.
behind his back with trust and
he
whatever.
kills Felix. Is like
yeah, exactly. And that was the moment he gave up on the
it's
idea.
no longer about Felix. It's about
Right.
Yeah.
he's seen behind the curtain
Hmm.
and now realizes what he wants, and he doesn't want to even though he has this attraction towards Felix, he can't stand in the way of his ultimate goal, and he knows a way to get it, and it just makes more strategic sense for him to kill Felix.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not happy about it.
No.
No.
He's really, and who wouldn't? Who would be? Jacob Elordi's
Yeah.
a beautiful man.
Yeah, what a beautiful man.
He probably the nicest character in the movie in a way. Even he's,
For
Yeah.
sure.
he's a big himbo.
Yeah. Like he seems like a good soul who was born in an oddly it's weird. It's possibly the most financially privileged
Mhm.
situation you can possibly get, but emotionally underprivileged.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
Even he
And-
compared to like the other kids in that situation, Farley and Venetia, he seems a little more like.
I wouldn't say emotionally underprivileged, but
I know what you mean.
it's yeah.
But
he seems aware. Yeah. And kinder.
well, I think we should move on to May December unless we got any final Saltburn thoughts. Other than it's good. Watch it with your parents.
Good.
See,
You know, if you got
see
it-
it with someone you love.
If you got to burn, I would say don't put salt in it.
Okay.
It's gonna hurt you.
All right. Let's
Sorry, I haven't watched these other films, so I had to get my little take in there.
let's Scott or Brian, who wants to sum up May December?
Scott, you're really good at that stuff, Scott. So if you want to go for it.
Okay. Let's see. So May December. It is the new movie from Todd Hayes. It's plot-wise, it's about Natalie Portman plays an actress who is coming to town, into small town, to meet Julia Moore's character, who she will be playing in the movie. So she spends the weekend, a little bit more than a weekend, with Julia Moore and her family. And what you realize through watching the movie is that the reason they're making a movie about Julia Moore's character is that 20 years ago, she had an affair with a coworker who was 13 at the time. It kind of does follow the Mary Kay Letourneau story. And that's the essential plot. That's not a very plotty movie. It's what happens over that was what the movie's about.
Yeah,
That's sort of thematically about all these movies we're talking about today. Is it's not like narratively heavy and everything, but just the way it kind of plays out.
Yeah, May December is really like so much of the plot, quote unquote, of the movie is like the economy of information and like how they kind of dole this stuff out to you. I don't know if we'll do a spoiler section because other than like one or two things that happen towards the end, there's not a lot of like big turns in the movie necessarily. There's a couple like smaller revelations, and as the movie goes, you get kind of bigger pictures of who these people are. Especially I would say
It's super character study though.
Yeah, especially Julie. All three of them really, because it is Charles Melton here. I got Charles. Let the tickle games begin. Melton, Riverdale star, a friend of a friend. That's not a lie. And who is great in it. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I've known for years that all these Riverdale cats had like got the juice, and it was cool to see like, oh yeah, hell yeah. Especially the one who is like a friend of a friend on the street, with one of my neighbors. Yeah, I just rewatched this. I liked it even more on a rewatch. It's a movie of like bombastic subtext, like so much of everything is like when the way they like structure it is really good, where Natalie Portman and Charles Melton are the age that Julianne Moore would have been when the affair started, and when he was 13. And there's this like scene where he's like he's an x-ray technician, and there's a scene where they're looking at like a kid who had a skateboarding accident, and Natalie Portman has this line about only 13, so small, and like puts her hand up and sees like how big the hand is compared to hers. And like I said, I would say that that's bombastic subtext, where like everything people are saying, you're like, oh fuck.
Absolutely.
Even the casting of those two as like the same age is interesting, because he's slightly younger than like that the age they're playing, and she's slightly older.
Yeah.
Because like at first I was like, what do you mean they're the same age? They're not, like, as two actors, they're that close. They're about a decade apart, but thematically that works very well for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also like it's a movie about rubbernecking, about like the urge, and it goes both ways, which is interesting, because the obvious rubbernecking is anytime Natalie Portman's character is supposed to be this actress who has a famous like TV show called Nora's Ark, where she's like a veterinarian, like some like, it sounds like some like stupid like procedural, essentially, where she treats animals. And every time she like walks into a restaurant or somewhere, there's always like a cutaway to like a group of like younger people, or like parents being like, oh, it's her, or there's all these little lines, like when she's meeting with Julianne Moore's ex-husband, the guy that she cheated on a teenager with. Like one of the first things he says is how big of a fan of her show he is. But then obviously the as the movie goes on, and because we're kind of from Natalie Portman's POV, and the movie kind of becomes about like, what the fuck is she doing there? Like, what is she really hope to achieve?
Her method acting is, it just keeps going and going and going, is what she wants to try to do. We just take it all in.
And I want to talk a little bit more about Mr. Charles Melton here. The scene where he gets high on the roof with his son, who is great, which is a great scene that goes from hilarious to like devastating by the end. Where he's just like crying. And also like some of those scenes he has with just Julianne Moore, where he's like comforting her because she's crying because she made a cake that no one's gonna eat or something, and she's just like devastated about it.
Yeah, because she has the cake business that basically the locals are just trying to do to keep her busy. And then it starts to fail, and his vulnerability through the whole film was very interesting to me. Like he definitely you could tell right away this dude really needs therapy. And every interaction he had, and even it reminds me of the roof one, you felt that, like, even though that's his son, it almost feels like the son is older, it has more maturity. And that was interesting, because the whole time it felt that.
I mean, it was very clear he has not matured since past 13.
It stopped.
And what I remember thinking about this movie is like, man, I wish we would spend way more time with the family.
Yeah.
Totally.
And like also just seeing what happens next. Like I just like I like the Natalie Portman stuff. Like that's what made the whole movie, and everything. But I also was like, oh, I could have just seen a story like that goes on. Like what does happen? Because like these kids, his kids, he has 3 kids, and it's very interesting their dynamic. Where like it's like Brian said, it's like, oh man, like in like 10 years they're going to have to take care of him. And like, it's very interesting because they kind of have a normal family with one major asterisk, and like that asterisk is there and is affecting everything. But on the surface, it's somewhat of a normal family where like you can kind of see the kids can kind of like make it out of this. I don't say unharmed, but like relatively like, all right, there's definitely going to be some work to be done afterwards.
Comparatively,
but like
especially compared to both of their parents, honestly. And because,
exactly. Yeah.
And the reason I bring up the media literacy stuff here, well, you know, I'll wait for spoilers. I think we will do a little spoiler section on this one, but
all right.
I want to say, I don't know, I've yet to see my neighbor since then to ask if it was a prosthetic or not, but if it's not a prosthetic in that scene, Melton, nice hog. So congrats, dude. You know
what? I will say, I'll compliment Barry Keoghan.
Yeah, another nice hog, and that one we know for sure. That's the genuine article.
That's a real deal.
And which isn't me saying that Charles Melton doesn't have a nice hog. It's more so that the way it's shot when you see it, I'm like, that could have been like a prosthetic for like because it's only for like half a second, basically.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're gonna show your dick on camera, you're probably pretty confident in its size, unless you're like fucking Harvey Keitel.
I don't want to get too much into the scene where the hog is seen, just because of potential spoilers. But I think the way it's shot makes me think that it could be a prosthetic, because it could have been easier. I think overall, every time I do this, the Zoom wants to do the hand up thing. Before we get into spoilers, I really need to see more Todd Haynes, because I think this was my first rodeo of his, and like I kind of written him off a little bit as like a guy who just makes dramas, and watching this I was like, oh, I think he makes the kind of dramas I like, though, the ones that have a little more, you know, or a little more interesting.
He actually reminds me a lot of David Lynch as a director, in that like he mixes like old timey with like the darkness underneath. Lynch obviously does it a bit more surreal, where he's a bit more into melodrama. Hence the score for this movie.
Yeah, which is great. It's apparently it's adapted from a movie called The Go-Between, which that score is by Michael Legrand, and this is by Marcelo Zarvos, and great main theme.
I really loved it.
And
I'm a big fan of Carol. I think that might be the only other one I've seen of his, but I like the style for sure.
I need to see that. I need to see Safe, because that's supposed to be really good. Movie made with Julianne Moore, where she's like a agoraphobe or something. But yeah, let's get a little into spoilers for this one. Because the one thing I wanted to bring up when talking about the media literacy, the takes I've seen is I've seen people give takes of this where it's like apologizing for what Julianne Moore did, which is insane, because at best
that's why Todd Haynes made this. He's like, hey man, Mary Kay did nothing wrong, and I am going to make my case for her.
Yeah, I think that maybe what they're getting that from is that we do get some reveals from Julianne Moore, from Gracie's her son she had in the previous marriage, who's the same age as Joe, her current husband. We get these reveals that she was maybe or maybe not raped and abused by her brothers when she was younger. And I think that, you know, I don't know, it's weird. I wonder if that's where people are coming from, where they're like, oh, well, they're making excuses for her. And it's like, I don't know if that's making excuses as much as it's trying to like wrestle with the fact that like no normal person would do what she did.
Right.
And you know, like I fundamentally don't believe that people like pop out of the womb like evil already and like, hey, I can't wait to do this bad thing. And that, you know, the things that make us do those things are usually rooted in either issues that we have internally, or maybe more often than not, like things that happen to us in our life. And I think a lot of what goes on with Gracie in this movie is at the beginning of the movie, she seems like kind of collected, you know, like, oh, she's having a picnic with Joe and the family and the friends. And then as we
she
go,
runs her business. She has a family.
and then as we go on, we start to see like, no, this woman's like fucking like real, like truly fucked up, like completely emotionally hobbled in a way that is hard to express.
I think my first indication of that was when the bedroom scene when he gets in and she just keeps, she could tell smoke or something from the grill or whatever, and she would not, like, she was so unhappy with him, and that was interesting. I think that was like the first time I was like, man, she's really kind of unhinged.
Yeah.
And actually going back to the scene of where like the son gives the backstory, like rather than like, my take on it necessarily wasn't like we should feel bad for her or like it's okay, or even, I think my personal take on that was like, because I guess going further, you don't know if it's true or not. Like, it is left a little bit ambiguous. And my personal take on that is like, does it really fucking matter? Because at a certain point, you know, I understand hurt people, but at a certain point, you are just hurting people. You know, like people talk about Michael Jackson's past of his father and it's abusive, and like there's no question that that's not true. But the fact of the matter is, he then used his power to continue that cycle of abuse.
And
I disagree.
Okay.
Well,
let's not get into that. Let me make my
Let's
point
not
real
get
quick.
into it.
I think that there are people who sit on either extreme of that, Scott, a lot of times, and I think it's like it's worth understanding what causes people to get into those loops, but it's also that's not making excuses for them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's understanding, because if you don't understand those things that lead to it, it's like
then they're just a bad person.
Then they're just a bad person.
Then they are just evil.
And it's like, this is my example I always kind of bring up is Charlie Manson. You know, Charles Manson was viewed as evil. Like, you ask a certain generation and, oh, he's evil. He's the embodiment of evil. And obviously he's a fucking shithead and an asshole, and he got a bunch of people killed. But he also, as a kid, his mom sold him for a pitcher of beer. He went to a foster home where he was raped constantly by both the other boys and the faculty. He lived with an uncle who was apparently worse than both his mom and the foster home, if you can imagine.
Jesus.
And so, like, just dismissing that and saying like, oh, he's just evil. To me, that's what leads. That's going to not necessarily cause, but it will let another Charles Manson happen in the future, because we go like this very personal responsibility of like, oh, well, you know, like blah 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 blah, and it's like, well, we need to realize the trauma and what's going on.
No, I agree.
Psychologically, I think it's a mix.
Yeah.
Nature and nurture, I think both have a key to play in creating someone like Charles Manson. I think most people who have an upbringing like Charles Manson aren't going to be killers.
Yes.
And I think most people who have a whatever you want to say, genetic composition like Charles Manson aren't going to be killers. But I think you create a recipe for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to go on also what you were saying, kind of, I think, like, it bugs me when people complain about, like, oh, you're humanizing someone, because it's like, well, I tell you that's what they're human.
Yeah,
like that's just it. And like, also, I think when you don't want to humanize someone, when you want to just see them as a monster, not only are you letting them off the hook, you're letting yourself off.
Yeah. And you're letting society off the hook and saying like, oh, this isn't, you know, like, we don't have any responsibility when it comes to
what
this.
could we have done? It's a monster.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's a monster we allowed to happen.
Yeah.
Brandon, I will say, of course, you want to understand villains, you want to understand evil and shit like that. But I think there should be a moral clarity to say this person is an asshole.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think, but I said that earlier. I think Charles Manson is an asshole. I think Gracie in this movie is clearly an asshole.
Yeah, clearly a monster. Like, honestly, like
as the movie when the movie starts and you find out the revelations, your immediate mind goes to, Gracie is a monster and Joe is a victim, or maybe not a victim necessarily. He is a victim, but like you're much more sympathetic. And as the movie goes on, it only like exaggerates that more and more. Even if you understand a little more about them, you only become less sympathetic to Gracie and more sympathetic to Joe. And the more interesting thing, and we can come back to this in a second, is the way your sympathies shift in regards to Natalie Portman's character.
Yeah, I mean, like Gracie sees her story as like a misunderstood love story.
Yeah.
And like you never agree with it because like, sorry, dude, she was 13. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, he was, but like, you can almost like at the top of the movie, it's like, well, I can kind of see how she sees it that way.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the end of the movie, it's like, oh no, she has molded it into this, you know, yeah, it's just fascinating. The dynamic, I was fascinated by the whole thing.
Yeah. And to talk a little bit about Natalie Portman and what happens with her, it's interesting because she kind of tries. She's like trying to assume Julianne Moore more and more. And as it goes on, there's that sequence towards the end where they even like light her hair. She hasn't dyed her hair that yet, but they light her hair in a way where it looks almost more like her, and she has like the pink lipstick that Julianne Moore is wearing, which is such a weird. That's such a weird note that Julianne Moore always wears pink lipstick. That seems like such a weird, like, childish. I don't know. I mean, no offense to people who wear pink lipstick. Is
this a shame people who wear pink lipstick?
Yeah, but
I
all
think
the time.
Julianne woman is a beautiful woman. I don't know how old she is.
She's like,
I don't care. I think she can wear pink lipstick no matter how old she is.
In the movie, she's supposed to be like roughly 60, I think. Because I think
I guess that's how old Julianne Moore is.
Because she's supposed to be 35-ish when it first happened, and it first happened in the early 90s, and this is supposed to be like the late 2010s in the movie. Because I think they said it there because he didn't want to have to deal with COVID. If I had to guess, didn't want to have to like narratively deal with the fact that like people would be wearing masks sometimes and things like that.
Also, just from a film context, I know Julianne Moore was supposed to be older for a porn actress in Boogie Nights, and that was in the 90s.
That's true.
It's like, how old is she now?
That's a whole other thing. That's porn actresses are like 18 years
but
old.
You know what? I'm just doing in terms of casting. Yeah. I'm not doing it. I pass no judgment. I'm just saying.
But the big turn, the big thing that happens, the big spoiler for the movie is Joe and Natalie Portman end up sleeping with each other, which Joe, I think, very childishly, and you kind of get it, thinks is going to be this like big. For him, it's this big like revelation. You know what I mean? Like this is the first time he's since he was. Because Gracie has some line about like Joe was with other girls his age before, like with more women, but whatever. Like, but this is like really
more women. He's been with more women than me.
But whatever. But this is really like the second woman he's ever really truly been with. Yeah. And Natalie Portman is just like was doing it in a combination of getting into character and also because I think she was horny. And she has that devastating line where he's like, "What the fuck? Like, you just wanted to sleep with me?
What was this? Yeah."
And she's just like, "This is just what grown-ups do." And then
that was such an intentional line too.
Yeah. Because she is kind of the grown-up and the only real grown-up in like the main three. Yeah. But you kind of see at that point, like it fully reveals the weird manipulation that she's doing, where she's like cracking open all this trauma, and who knows what'll happen next. Maybe it'll end up being good for Joe. Probably not. Probably not.
It doesn't. Most of what happens throughout this movie does not seem to be in favor of Joe.
No. One could only hope. It feels like things would only go up now that he has an empty nest. He at least it happened then, but then there's that ending, which is I think is the most almost puzzling part of it is like we see the movie briefly that she's shooting, and it doesn't look very good. Which
I think that's
Yeah.
that's intentional. Is
Yeah,
that
no,
like she
100%.
was going through all this yeah, we all thought like maybe it was going to be some sort of like prestige, year-end movie, and then it looks like it's going to be slightly trashier than like
I
movie.
haven't seen this movie.
There was a movie made, like within the movie, there was a movie already made about this story.
Yeah.
And that seemed like one of those like shot in 10 days where like this one was going to be like a slightly higher budget made for TV movie, or
Yeah, they took a whole month to film this new one.
yeah. This one might be up for some Emmys.
Yeah. But yeah, what an interesting flick.
I do always think that's funny. It's like you get these like actors who are just like so dedicated to their craft that they'll spend like months preparing for a role and being in character and studying, and then the movie turns out to be a piece of shit. And it's not like in their own control, it sucks, but they're just one cog in the wheel.
A gig is a gig is a gig, man.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's not. They put their life into this thing. They put their heart into it, and it just turns out like garbage.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
definitely, I would say like thematically, Natalie Portman doesn't necessarily represent just an actress. She represents, I think, the way in general, like media and Hollywood specifically can kind of just like throw a nuclear bomb into a situation and then kind of jump out of the way like, I'm just making a movie.
Honestly, you kind of remind me, like this whole movie reminded me a lot of Killers of the Flower Moon. Just dealing with like how media deals with this type of thing. And also just the fact that like I feel like the victim's story was the most interesting part, and that we didn't necessarily spend as much time with them. Because I think the other thing about this is that like I think Natalie Portman's character was also somewhat into like the eroticism and like what she saw as eroticism.
Yeah.
And like the whole like this whole like older woman, younger man dynamic, when like if the genders were flipped on this story, like her character wouldn't even be there to be making a movie about it, because it'd be just some dirtbag who hooked up with a teenager. You know what I mean? Like they're not making movies about that.
No.
There's no media sensation about a 35-year-old man sleeping with a 13-year-old child. They just go to jail, hopefully. We're all disgusted by it.
That was called Lolita.
I guess we made it once.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a comedy. we all enjoyed it.
There is that.
It's a goof.
There is that
It's a
great
little
scene where
fun.
Natalie Portman is looking at like the casting tapes for who's gonna play younger Joe, and it's all these like 13-year-old Korean boys, and she's like, and she calls the director, and she's like, they're not sexy enough. She doesn't say that exactly, but that's essentially what she's saying.
No, I think she's like, I think we need to get someone sexier or something.
Yeah, she has
like,
something.
You know what? I'm reminded of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, is that
Getting
something?
But like, I think what was weird is in that scene, I knew
Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I knew what she meant, what her character meant. Like that was the wrong word, but like that was like, I would say part of the problem. Like part of like what made Joe a victim was that he was probably built very, like he was probably like physically well built and like looked more mature than he was.
They show those like
that,
pictures of him when he was that age, and he does look more mature.
Where it's like if in casting they probably been like, we're gonna have to cast like a 16 or 17-year-old to play a 13-year-old, type of thing. Where it's like, they just all look like kids. Like, yes, that's what a 13-year-old is. It's a kid. Like, it's a kid.
Yeah. Well, if we're going May December, let's briefly move on to Eileen and Napoleon. We'll do them one at a time.
I will say one more thing.
Yeah.
Just
100%.
my friend was mentioning May December. I follow him on Twitter. She was not a fan, but somebody else like saw the title and was like, "That's supposed to like explained what a May December romance is and how it's not appropriate. A descriptor for like what this relationship was, and I didn't bother getting into it, but I kind of be like, yeah, that's kind of like that's exactly what he was going for. He knows, he is aware. But just getting back into the theme of media literacy, even like
literacy,
a title can be misread or misunderstood.
Well, speaking of a title that could not, two titles that could not be misunderstood because they're literally just the names of the lead characters.
Hey,
did I not add...
Sometimes you got to be that direct.
I didn't add these two backgrounds. Here's my Eileen background. It's about a Miami-Dade police investigating threat against movie theater because of a story I have to tell about the movie. But Eileen, Brian, do you want to give a brief summary of Eileen?
Sure. So Eileen takes place in the 60s in Massachusetts. Thomas McKenzie is who plays Eileen. She works at a corrections facility for boys, young juveniles, and just kind of has a shitty, mundane life. Like she goes home, her dad is pretty verbally abusive, paranoid. He's got a lot of issues going on, and and ultimately she's also questioning a lot with herself, and her sexuality is a big thing that's coming up. Funnily enough, I thought May December might, just from director's standpoint, might have more queer vibes, but this was definitely the queer movie of all that. And it was great, and it was really one of those where basically Anne Hathaway shows up, and she's the new psychologist, and they basically, she just gets super enamored, and there's an age dynamic, obviously, between the two of them, and it sort of just plays out in this really interesting story of how they get to know each other. And again, that whole last half is sort of the catalyst of it all.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a slow burn and thriller, even more so than May December in a way. It definitely has more like highs than it plays a lot with point of view and like subjectiveness. There's a lot of sequences that are clearly the character imagining things. I don't really want to get into what those are because we're trying to avoid spoilers here, but as it goes on, you start to question more and more, like, is any, like, especially in the last third, like, did any of this actually happen? Like, how much of this actually happened? How much of this is her, like, internal fantasy going off? And Anne Hathaway is really great in it. Doing something that she reminded me, and you'll have to walk with me for a second on there, but her performance here reminds me a lot of Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse, where on the surface, what they are doing could so easily become shtick. Like Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse could so easily just be like, "Are you ready, kids? Lives in a pineapple under the sea." And Anne Hathaway in this could so easily be, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is great in Hudsucker Proxy, but it could be that where it's just like, I'm just a dame from out of town, and I'm doing and that stuff. But she plays it so, and same thing with Willem Dafoe in Lighthouse. They play it so well and with so much like humanity that it just works, and it like transcends that trope and plays almost like the ultimate version of that trope. And
even because the time frame we're playing it out, like obviously where it's definitely the male dominated world, she sort of comes in and it's just throws that upside down, which for the times was obviously would have been so jarring. And by playing it the way that she did, it made that just feel so much more real that she's somebody who just comes in and just causes disruption, in a lot of ways.
And I like that the movie's kind of about a female incel in a way. Thomasin McKenzie's character is very, I don't know if this was like an intent going into it, but like what the like women version of that like mindset would be, especially as it goes on, and you kind of like, it's kind of like the Natalie Portman thing in May December, where early on you're very sympathetic towards her, and as it goes on and you start revealing more and more things, you're like, wait a minute, like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? I want to talk very briefly about my experience, because I've seen this movie 1 2/3 times. Because the first time I saw this movie with Brian, there was a guy sitting next to me. It was at a theater we go to often. I don't want to name it. I don't want to dox myself. And the guy sitting next to me, he was having little comments here and there to the movie, but for the most part, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not, not a confrontational. And it was more like, when one of the really shocking, like, subjective moments would happen, he would go like, oh, damn, something like that. And it was just like, okay, whatever. I'm going to let it go. But then right before the big turn happens, there's a big scene where Thomason and Anne are having this long conversation, and they're talking about like how men are so repressed sexually, and he starts like muttering all this stuff, and by muttering I mean he's talking like about this loud, more or less, and he starts talking about how how he's like, I'm not ashamed, I'm a freak, like I'm gonna make it squirt and things like that, and saying all this stuff. And I did something that I have always thought about doing to someone who talk in a movie theater, and it's not the nicest thing to do, but what I did is when he said something, I turned to him and I said, as honestly as I could, as if I was like a friend of his who didn't hear what he said, I said, what was that? And he didn't like that. He started telling me about how he was the wrong one to mess with, and about how like he's a grown man, which is debatable, and how he was gonna stab me or cut me or something like that.
Jesus.
And so I left.
You gotta watch it.
Yeah.
Everyone in LA has a knife.
Yeah. And in the end, it ended up being okay. Not okay. Like that. I definitely that night. This is like, if you're my psychiatrist, don't watch the next 10 seconds. But definitely that night I got to bed, I was like thinking about ways I would torture this man.
Oh my goodness.
Because I was just like so furious
after
I got home, where I felt I felt very personally like, I felt very undignified. Like this guy like thinks he's like such a fucking whatever, that he can just like say this shit to me. But, is this media literacy? Is like him not knowing the type of movie and crowd he was with? I don't think so. That
was the funny thing, because we did a double. We did 4 things that night, and I was kind of excited because that was obviously like a lot, and that's a whole other podcast. But then I remember kind of going, I was like, okay, this is going to be like a really chill. Like, honestly, I was expecting more of a queer crowd and this and that, and it wasn't. It was kind of overall a different than expected crowd, and we deducted that at the end he was definitely the guy who just has the he just goes as often as he can. He has the thing, sure. And A-list, I guess we can say that. I don't say for location, but so you can tell he's one of those, and I think that's why he got so upward and mad, because because I had the uncomfortable moment of like, do I follow Connor out, or do I just kind of like sit here and finish it? And I just didn't want to add any more disruption to already happening, so I just sort of like sat there. And the dude just kept going on for another 5-6 minutes, where other people were telling him to shut up. And then he's like throwing cups all over the place, and a handful of people left. Yeah, like the dude just kept going. Like you could tell, like it was one of those, the attention came on him and he went full blast. Yeah. And it was an interesting thing, but obviously not the first time he's done something.
Movies at back, baby.
At that point, tell somebody to escort him out.
Oh, I did. I went and told someone, and somebody else from the theater came out and seconded me. And to be fair, I think he, like, not long after I left, quickly left of his own volition as well.
It was after he finished his temper tantrum. Yeah, he got up, and I remember it was so funny because he got up and he passed in front of me, and he's like, "Excuse me, sir," and I was, what? It was such an odd, but it was just like the character switch was wild.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it's an overcompensation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that over here.
Well, that's Eileen. Let's briefly talk about Napoleon.
Napoleon.
It's I'll do the summary on this one. There's 4 movies and 4 of us. It's about Napoleon. You know the guy, Napoleon? It's about him.
And you know what? I haven't seen this movie. I don't even know who Napoleon is.
Oh, he's a man.
And we got the movie for you.
People tell me he's French. I don't know. He's got a hat. He's got a triangle hat.
Does have a hat.
He's shorter.
I went into Napoleon thinking like, oh, I think it's fine and whatever, and I actually liked it quite a bit more than I thought I would. I don't think I was wild about it. It's probably my least favorite of the 4 movies we're talking about tonight, but it was still pretty good. I almost wished the biggest thing for me is I know there's like a longer like 4-hour version supposed to come out like on Apple
Yeah.
TV or whatever
Mhm.
at some point.
Mhm.
And the biggest compliment I can give the movie is going into the movie, which I saw cheap at the Vista on 70mm, which was a big part of it also. Going into the movie, I was like, there's no way I'm going to want to watch this extended version. And the biggest compliment I can give the movie is I'm interested in watching the extended version.
Yeah.
And there's a couple movies this year that...
I just looked at the picture of is that from Bill and Ted?
It is.
Okay.
There's a couple movies this year that I feel like would have almost been better served if they had been like 4 to 8 hour miniseries as opposed to movies, and I think Napoleon is probably one of them, for sure. But what would you think, Scott?
Yeah, I liked it for the most part. Ridley Scott, it's always, you never know, you know, with him. I'm a fan of his for the most part and stuff, but you know, like sometimes you're gonna get Last Duel, sometimes you're gonna get House of Gucci. You never know. So I went into this with high hopes, but
Which one of those was supposed to be good?
House of Last Duel.
House of Gucci was supposed to be, but it was the reverse.
Yeah, Last Duel was. I really dug that one.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's man, it's gnarly in parts. But this, I enjoyed it, but it definitely felt like, oh yeah, they just put like what they had to in this movie to get to the 2.5 hour cut, because I wouldn't be surprised if the longer cut actually flows better.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a lot like in between like story and character parts. It's kind of like, now this is happening, now this is happening, now this, and I feel like the whole thing would have flowed a little bit better. Much like, have you seen Kingdom of Heaven?
I haven't, but I know it's going to be very good.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, but if you see the theatrical cut of that movie, it's pretty jarring when you see like the parts where it's like, oh, wow, they cut out a whole storyline that just changes completely who this character is. So yeah, I'm curious to see the longer cut too. It's a shame we couldn't have got that in theaters. It looks pretty good. Like the battle scenes were good. I thought Joaquin Phoenix did good.
Yeah, I love his portrayal of Napoleon as like a nasty little freak. I think probably the most unexpected laugh of the year for me is when the British people come to try to negotiate with him, and he starts like freaking out, and he ends the fight with going like, "You all think you're so great just because you have boats," and then he like leaves. And not to be like too much of a dude, but Vanessa Kirby and those corsets was working for her. Hubba.
But you know, speaking of media literacy, there are people posting that like line about like, you think you're so great because you have boats. They're posting that like that clip on Twitter, and like look how cheesy this is, and it's like, well, no, that was supposed to be. We are supposed to be laughing at Napoleon at that point. Like this is, I
was going to bring that up. I've seen people complain about like, oh, well, it changes the history. And I'm like, who fucking gives a shit, bro? Like, like the big issue I have with the movie has nothing to do with like whether it's real or not. And I don't want to say what the emotional climax of the movie is, but the biggest issue I had with the movie is that the emotional climax happens about 40 minutes before the end of the movie. And so you get to that the Waterloo battle sequence, and you're just kind of like, I'm not super invested because Napoleon is just kind of like defeated already at this point.
It doesn't quite earn its ending. Even like the last epilogue, like when you find out like his final words, they don't quite hit as hard as I think they're supposed to. And again, I wonder if that 4-hour cut is going to change that.
Well, yeah. Well, now that we've talked about
how much money does Napoleon take? Like how much was the budget?
I think it was a couple $100 million.
Couple $100 million.
Yeah.
How much did it rake in?
It didn't have. It didn't have. It didn't have a big release at all.
Well, because I think its big release is going to be on streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This like Apple is kind of doing a new
streaming,
thing.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, this movie it'll be a big hit on streaming.
Well,
because even Killers of the Flower Moon didn't have a wide. Did it have a wide release?
Yeah, it
not, did.
Yeah,
not like a huge.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what? I already know how the movie ends. I don't need to see it. I don't need to spend 3 hours watching a Napoleon movie. I know he dies.
Yep. Spoiler.
he does. Yeah, he does die.
Spoiler.
Well,
yeah, I think Apple's doing
it was
something
from 100 and something years ago.
They're releasing more of their movies in theaters, like with studios, because I think they're also involved with like Argyle.
I do think, to be honest, I get a little bit triggered when I see that a movie is being produced by Amazon or something like that. Because I'm like, oh, they're just going to try to destroy film. That's their goal.
Well,
they don't want this to be in theaters. This has to be in theaters. They're rolling their eyes at the concept of film.
Well, that's a convo for another time.
But anyway,
now it's time for
fuck Napoleon.
Connor's Wicked Games. Like Jigsaw every week, I like to play a little game. Sponsored by Chris Isaac. I forgot that part.
This is my favorite part of the show.
Tonight we have probably one of the easiest games. Kind of easing back into the year. This is the Media Illiteracy Challenge. I'm going to read a
I'm media literacy. I'm not very good at media literacy.
I'm going to read a description of a movie, but here's the catch. This description is a common misinterpretation of the movie. So these aren't actual descriptions. These are like through the filter of how these movies are viewed. And to be fair, your mileage may vary. So one or two of these might be things that I've seen like once, but most of these I think are pretty common. I think they'll be pretty easy. We'll do not the usual, but the thing I do where we start with a different person each time and everyone will get their own chance to answer. And then I'll reveal if anyone got it. Anybody who gets it gets 2 points. If no one gets it, I'm going to start just reading out other details about the movie. And then at that point, first person to shout out the name of the movie will get 1 point. But to start, we'll do it very structured. So let's have Scott. You're the reigning champion here. Let's have you go first. So this movie. Here's the description of this fucking movie. In a completely non-political move, a revolutionary group does a big terror attack against an evil empire.
Star Wars?
Brian?
Yeah, Star Wars is the first thing that came to my brain.
Paul?
I would guess Star Wars as well.
You're all correct. That is indeed Star Wars. That is a weird thing people say online where they're like, these movies aren't political at all. And I mean, I guess they aren't in certain ways, but it's kind of hard, I think, to completely.
It is what it is.
All right, Brian, you're going to start on this one. Like I said, I think this is one of the easiest games I've ever made because I had this idea and I was like, this is such a fun idea, but these are going to be pretty obvious and they're largely misinterpretations from the point of view of conservative men who think that nothing is political, but some of them aren't.
All right.
So we'll see.
These are the ones their favorite band is Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah. Right? Exactly. This next one, an inspiring, uplifting story of a guy who gets more out of life once he figures out a neat, fun way of doing stocks.
Oh, I know this.
American Psycho?
Paul?
I'm going to say Wolf of Wall Street.
Scott?
That's what I'm going with too, Wolf of Wall Street.
Sorry, Brian. It's these two guys are right. That is Wolf of Wall Street.
People love Wolf of Wall Street for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. He's not supposed to be a good guy.
No, but hey,
He's
I'm not
not.
supposed to like this man.
he's on that grind though. You don't understand.
Yeah.
Paul, this one starts with you. This movie is about a fascist military kills a scared bugs, something the movie thinks is really cool.
Wait,
A fascist military kills a scared bugs, something the movie thinks is really cool.
what? Russia's military kills scared bugs?
Yeah. And the movie thinks this is a cool thing.
District 9?
Scott?
Starship Troopers.
Brian?
I'm gonna go with Scott. So you felt confident on that one.
That makes more sense.
It is indeed Starship Troopers, a movie that people genuinely criticized as being pro-fascist when it came out. Like, real critics
What the fuck?
in the media were like, this is a fascist movie about how fascists are cool.
And
I
it
feel
was.
like my answer was at least tangentially appropriate.
Yes. You get
when you said it, I knew it was the wrong answer, but I was like, I can see where he's coming
you
from.
get style points, which don't mean anything, but
Right.
all right, Scott, this one starts with you.
Right.
The ultimate Sigma male has fun sex with a bunch of broads and has everything under control.
That's very vague.
Yeah, let's see that again.
The ultimate Sigma male has fun sex with a bunch of broads and has everything under control.
Fuck, I can't think of the name of it. I don't even know if this is the one, but like, it's with Michael Fassbender. I
Are you
can't-
thinking of Shame?
Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah. I don't know
But
that
he
one.
has sex with men in that one too.
I mean, there's not a lot he doesn't have sex with in that movie. So,
That's true.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna go shame.
Brian, do you got a guess?
I have no other answer, so I'll stick with you guys. Yeah.
Shame. Paul?
Wait, can you
Riding
repeat
coattails.
it, Connor?
The ultimate Sigma male has fun sex with a bunch of broads and has everything under control.
I'm gonna guess Revenge of the Nerds.
All right, we have to move into the second part because no one has gotten
Okay.
this one yet.
Nobody has
Alright.
gotten this one.
So this one is only worth 1 point. It's the first person who shouts out the correct answer. Only one person.
Alright.
If two people do, I'll give it to both. This movie is from 2000. It was directed by Mary Herron, starring Christian Bale, Willem Dafoe.
Oh, American Psycho.
It is Paul. Yeah,
That's great.
I almost
Yeah.
wanted to hint you more like Brian, like you guessed this earlier, but I thought that
That's
would be. But I've seen that online. There's a lot of people who like view Patrick
What?
Bateman as like he's the
He has
ultimate.
everything under control.
He's the ultimate Sigma male. You know, whatever
Wait,
that means.
Sigma male? He's by far alpha male.
Well, Sigma is like above Alpha.
What?
Yeah,
Alpha is the first of the alphabet.
Sigma's even more though. You got to think about it.
How do you get more anyway? Whatever. Oh, I guess it's like S tier.
Yeah, I think that's where I think that was.
I
the
think that's what it
origin
is.
of it.
Okay, yeah, I understand now.
All right, Brian, this is on you. An immigrant comes to America, finds his fortune dealing drugs, and becomes a role model to us all.
Scarface.
Paul?
Fuck, Scarface is a good answer. I'll go with Scarface as well.
I'm also gonna have to jump on that Scarface bandwagon.
Well, it's good you did because that is correct. That is
All right.
the movie Scarface, directed by Mr. Brian De Palma. Paul, this next one starts with you.
Okay.
A charming loner gets rejected by a total bitch, then heroically murders a bunch of criminals.
Oh god damn it. Charming bitch is rejected by a total bitch. Murders a bunch of criminals. Fuck, I don't know. Shit. I'll go with Drive.
Scott,
I'm going to go with Taxi Driver.
Brian.
Oh, that's much better.
That's a good one. That's it right there. I'm on that.
That's much better.
It is.
That's
It
the
is
one.
indeed
That's the one.
Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
You know what? In terms of tone, I feel like I was on the right track.
100%. You have a second style point.
He wasn't going to eject Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
If Oscar Isaacs didn't get out of jail, she would have been all over that Ryan Gosling business.
That's fair.
All right, Scott. This one starts with you. This is a movie about a dude who starts a club for men with his cool and always correct best friend.
I'm going to go Fight Club.
Brian.
Yeah. That's Fight Club for sure.
I'm going with the same.
All right. Yep. That is indeed 1999's Fight Club, a movie
99
that I myself also
Damn.
misinterpreted as a kid. But
That's
I was 18.
so
I was like
old.
16.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I hate Fight Club.
Oh, really?
I think I really don't like it but like it's more of like not as a filmmaking perspective. I think David Fincher's genius. I just from a like Chuck whatever
Palahniuk?
Paul fucking. I think he's an asshole.
Yeah, he is kind of an asshole, but I think
I don't
that's like
him.
I think that's a lot of modern authors, to be fair.
It's whatever.
Brian, this one starts with you. This is a movie about a veteran who is not traumatized, and he does so much cool shit. They made like 4 other movies about even cooler shit he did.
Expendables.
I know this one.
It sounds like some action movie that I don't know.
Paul?
Rambo.
Ah, shit.
Scott?
Well, the movie I believe you're describing is First Blood.
Yes. I'm gonna give that to Paul also, because I think that's
Thank you. I feel like that's fair.
Yes.
Give that to me.
I think it is.
I had the actor.
You did have the
Oh,
actor.
yeah.
I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. You both came close.
Yeah.
There's just so many plots of action movies that it could have been in a lot of ways.
That was a movie that was, I think, misinterpreted by the people who made it. Because they were like, "Oh, this did well. Let's make some badass action movies." No.
Yeah.
Rambo 2, man. Reagan's America came alive.
They
with that
did
one.
look.
I
They did
feel
not
like-
misinterpret the dollars that came pouring in.
I feel like it was interpreted by I think it was interpreted right by the people who originally made First Blood. And then they saw the money.
Yeah. It's kind of like
And
how the
we're
Rocky
like-
series progressed, where like the first
Yes.
Rocky
Yeah.
is this beautiful
Yeah,
character
totally.
study, and then
Rocky
by the
was
fourth
not
one,
made to be a franchise.
No.
The first Rocky movie. But whatever, made a lot of money.
well, Paul,
Let's make more money.
this next one starts with you. Very simple. This is a movie about noble liberals hunting down vile conservatives.
That's extremely vague. Oh, God. Noble liberals hunting down vile conservatives. Fuck, I don't know. Let's go with Predator.
Oh, yeah.
You get a third style point for that answer, Paul.
Thank you.
Scott.
In that vein, I'm gonna go with Alien. They were all working class people on that ship.
Brian.
I don't remember if they're conservative, but I'm thinking The Hunt. I'm just going to say randomly.
Brian got it this time. That was indeed The
Oh,
Hunt.
yeah.
Hunt?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it.
I couldn't remember if they were going, but I remember it kind of being something like that. So,
It
yeah,
is a
check it out.
movie about coastal elite liberals hunting down poor conservatives, and conservatives legit in the media were like, "This is a movie about how like Hollywood hates conservatives," and I was like, "Well, the conservatives are kind of the good, like the more
The heroes,
positive
yeah.
portrayed."
Yeah.
Like the liberals are the bad guy, like the horror movie villains in this movie. Like, what are you fucking talking about?
I
But
haven't seen The Hunt.
it's really good. I like that movie a lot.
They also kill like a bunch of big names in the first like 30 seconds. And
Yes,
it's kind
yeah.
of amazing.
Yeah. All right, this is our
Like
last.
Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, exactly. This is our last three, starting with you, Scott. Last one, starting with you. This movie is about how robots are actually a prejudiced against group, and this movie explores the real conflict between AI and humans.
I know what you're thinking of.
I might have talked
Ex-
to Paul about this.
Machina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian,
Well, yeah.
Ex Machina is a good one. Yeah.
Paul.
The Creator.
This is indeed The Creator,
Oh,
From
I
shit.
thought about it for a second. I fucking thought about it. Damn.
which I've
In
seen.
my defense, I completely forgot that movie existed already.
Yeah, that movie sucks. That's why.
Yeah.
But-
You know what? I love The Creator.
Yeah,
Oh,
I thought it was
the
pretty
worst
good.
opening night at Beyond.
Well, I shouldn't say loved. I really like The Creator.
I enjoyed it, but it is one of those things where, like, even if whatever our opinions on it, I think we can all agree that I've seen people online like dismissing it, like in the context of modern AI talks, like, oh, well, robots aren't real people, and it's like it's a fucking metaphor for people who are different than you. Like, what are you fucking stupid?
Yes.
Like,
Nothing to do with AI.
yeah,
Like really.
Well, because the whole dialogue too, it was like the way Marvel does like quantum realm shit. It was just like they just said AI a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is about foreign policy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Brian,
whatever.
this movie is about a horrible boy man who annoyingly wastes money and time completely unintentionally.
What?
A horrible boy man wastes money and time unintentionally, and it's fucking annoying.
I
don't know. I can't. Yeah, I have no idea.
I have an awful answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Weekend at Bernie's.
Paul?
I was gonna say Weird Science.
Scott?
Clifford?
All right, we gotta go to this. We gotta go to the second part.
All right, here we go.
Everyone. The second I say who it's directed by, get on your mouth triggers or whatever it is.
Okay.
This is a 2001 movie directed by Tom Green.
Freddy got fingered.
Freddy got fingered.
Freddy got fingered.
Freddy!
I heard Scott first. It is indeed.
Yeah, I
said
would
it
never
so
have gotten that
fast.
on its own.
It is Freddy Got Fingered, which is a movie that I think like is intentionally, in my read of the movie, is intentionally like blowing a bunch of money and
Yes.
making fun of it. But a lot of people were
I
like,
love
oh,
Freddy Got
he
Fingered.
he was trying to make like a real studio comedy and whatever. I'm like, well, I don't know, like kind of, but
I think
I just know that
he's going
Sorry,
with the flow a little bit.
yeah.
And
I just will say
going
that
creates a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah.
it's just bonkers. That hospital room scene, I will just never get out of my head.
And last one, we're gonna start with you, Paul. And I'll say this: Scott has won no matter what, and so Brian and Paul, you
Oh,
guys are
no.
competing for second place, but everyone's getting medals tonight at least. This last movie, this horrible legacy sequel just repeats bits from the original films for no reason other than evoking nostalgia.
That's every Legacy sequel.
There's so many.
But
But I
this
got one that comes to mind
this
for sure.
horrible. But you have to understand, this is a
It's like,
misinterpretation.
which Star Wars movie is this?
This horrible
Like-
legacy sequel just repeats bits from the original films for no reason other than evoking nostalgia. Nostalgia?
I'm gonna guess Rogue One.
Scott?
I'm gonna go with The Force Awakens.
Brian?
I'm gonna go with Exorcist Believer.
All right, we got to go to the second part.
All right. I think that just describes how.
And again, get your get your trigger fingers ready, so to speak. This is a 2021 movie directed by Lena Wachowski, starring.
Matrix. Whatever the fuck.
I'll give
Revolution.
I'll give it to you.
Resurrection.
Thank you.
Resurrection.
Fuck.
I would have taken Matrix 4 also.
I
But
was
yeah,
about to say Matrix 4, but I was thinking of the colon.
which is a movie that,
Stupid thing.
in my opinion, very specifically is evoking like that stuff as a critique of it. But a lot of people were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the movie's just like a bunch of member berries and blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Well, that's like the point of the movie
Yeah.
is that it's like about hollow nostalgia." And so, but yeah, that was Scott got gold, Paul
Scott
silver,
wins!
Brian bronze, but Scott wins as usual, the reigning champ, probably the best GPA of the bunch, so to speak. But yeah,
I'm applauding you.
He's applauding, but it wasn't picking up on the mic.
Well,
I could feel it.
You could.
It was felt.
And yeah, let's move on. Edwin's not here. Frasier's over. So anything else people want to talk about? I wanted to mention 2 other great movies from 2023. Maybe not great, but I really enjoyed The Kane Mutiny Court Martial, the last film by William Friedkin, which isn't a
cool.
totally successful movie. It kind
wait, did he die?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a bit
What
like
the fuck?
almost like last summer. And
that's too bad.
it's a courtroom.
I miss. Then again, I don't think I haven't seen a movie he's done in a very long time.
It's a courtroom movie that's set almost entirely, I think entirely in the courtroom and in the hall outside. And there's like one scene towards the end that isn't. And it kind of, the production and some of the actors, it kind of gives the vibe of like a show you would see within 30 Rock that like people are watching, but without the jokes.
Right.
But then there's other stuff in it that's great, like Kiefer Sutherland, who sounds like Norm Macdonald the whole time, gives a great performance. Really? Lance Reddick, who's like the head judge, also rest in peace, gives a really great performance. Really worth checking out, and also worth checking out one of 2023's great movies, Mafia Mama. Which we all watched the other week, and
well, I started watching it and I got bored.
Yeah,
it's honestly not I didn't get bored. I was very, very tired, but also I think if I was more entertained, I probably would have finished it.
It's yeah, it's like I liked that there's a description on Letterboxd that Brian brought up when we were watching it, that it feels like an iCarly episode directed by Tarantino, and it's a shockingly violent movie for moms.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
I like Toni Collette. I think she's great.
Well, she and Monica Bellucci make the movie 100%.
Yeah. Without her,
it's just a waste. Yeah.
I know this sounds. I said this when we saw it. It sounds like damning with faint praise, but it's the perfect type of movie to watch on an airplane.
Yes. Other than
totally.
other than the scene where the guy gets like stabbed in the eyeball, and like his gory eyeball is like on the floor and stuff. You missed
Then there's that bathroom scene. They were cutting everybody. They're cutting the dude apart in pieces. That's a little rough.
Yeah.
It was weird how it swung when it swung.
Yeah, you would think the studio would be like, "Hey, can we make this a little less violent?" But I'm glad that they didn't.
Everything else is just like she's chilling and she's.
I don't think the studio was paying enough attention to this movie.
No, I agree.
Yeah, that's probably.
I saw the title and was like, "That's gonna be fun."
Yeah.
Oh,
Mafia Mama.
It is a great title.
It is a great title.
But anything else anyone else got to say? I want to say let's get a motherfucking ceasefire up in here if we could.
All right, let's do it.
Well, I don't. No one's taken the things, the opportunity. So
I'll say one more that because I was mentioning you earlier, Connor. On a Monday, I want to bring it to the group. But when Evil Lurks, I just kind of can't stop thinking about it. As far as a great horror movie that stuff I have not seen and the way it's delivered. I really want to have the rest of you guys all see it because it's not left me since I've seen it.
I'd like to check that one out. I've heard a lot about it.
Please follow me on Twitter. I mean,
Twitch.
on Twitch. I'm Pinsky TTV on Twitch.
And on Twitter, he's Elon Musk.
I'm Elon Musk. I tweet about like anti-Jewish propaganda and shit.
Like
if you're into that stuff,
and you just nail those memes, man.
Yeah,
every single one of them.
The freshest.
I'm so cool. I'm the hit, and I'm with it with the Gen Z white males.
You got with Grimes, and she made a Dune concept album. How cool is that?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I want to thank Brian here for composing our outro. Please check us out on social media, CinemaCurse666 on TikTok and Instagram. Next episode, we're starting at I gotta rewatch these first couple episodes, but next week, Twin Peaks Book Club Volume 1.
Oh shit!
We're talking about the pilot and episodes 1 and 2, and so that should be really, really fun. I have a really stupid idea for a game for that episode, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull it off, but we will see. So I'm here's hoping. And if you please like and subscribe on YouTube where I'm posting these. I'm posting some. I've renamed my YouTube channel that I'm posting these from Connor's old stream warehouse to Connor's online warehouse because I'm posting other odds and ends like this. I found this. I found this this alternate ending to the movie Martyrs, and so I decided to post.
Oh,
that
I watched
on there.
that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's a really interesting alternate ending to that movie that people should definitely check out. It's definitely I definitely didn't manipulate the movie as a joke. Yeah, that's I think that's it. As the Black Eyed Peas didn't say, let's get it ended. Think about that one.
That's not what they said.
That is not what they said. But all right. Thank you guys for joining.
Let's get. Never mind.
Thank you guys for joining. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for watching.